Stutter's Creek Transcript. Chapter 1. Frigid breath hissed out between Kerhelon Tarhoon's sharp teeth. As a silver, cold-aligned dragonborn, Tarhoon was accustomed to frozen winter nights. That meant the cool morning breeze didn't bother him. He looked out over the water in the direction of the land toward which they were heading. A man named Mordecai Thessala had hired Tarhoon, along with some other mercenaries, to uncover the cause behind some vicious attacks at a mine he owned. More details were expected when they arrived. Tarhoon turned to face the others on the small ship they had chartered as a noise indicated the door leading below decks had been opened. One of the sailors came out and approached the group. "So, who are you fellers?" he asked in a friendly manner. "I've been down below for the entire trip." A very tall, bulky humanoid covered in shaggy brown fur stepped forward boldly. "Greetings! I am Shirk," he said boisterously, extending his hand. "Good to meet you." The sailor's eyes went wide as they saw the large, furry creature approaching him. "You're hairy," the sailor said dumbly, making no move to take Shirk's hand. The man seemed like he was from the country and had clearly never seen a bugbear before. "Thank you. I clean it daily," Shirk replied loudly, his voice booming out from the ship. If Tarhoon were anyone else, Shirk's loud, jovial nature could have been quite infectious. But Tarhoon was here on business, and as such, he had no mood for it. "You seem like a lovely fellow." The sailor's eyes blinked slowly. "You're my kind of man," Shirk said, roughly slapping the man on the back and knocking him forward a bit. "What is your name, friend?" "I'm Jebediah." "Nice to meet you," Shirk responded happily. "Jebediah the sailor, from down below." Jebediah seemed to have gained a bit of his composure back. "Who are the rest of you people? I know this, Shrek. Who are you?" "You know what? If you want to call me that, you can. Just remember," Shirk leaned in and smiled, whispering quietly, "if we ever meet a real Shrek, I will kill you." "Okay there, friend." Jebediah backed off, a little unnerved by the statement. "I am Pip." The words were lost in the tension of the moment, but everyone turned to look at the person who spoke. She was a gnome about 3 feet tall and sitting in a very dignified manner. Where Shirk's attire looked rough and weather-beaten, her clothes looked nice and well-maintained, despite the small telltale snags and other evidence of travel. Her back was straight, and her poise was perfect. "Oh boy, you're diminutive," the sailor replied, obviously attempting to use large words on someone clearly well-educated enough to know their meaning. He squatted down to Pip's height. "And who are you, little feller?" Tarhoon was amused at how bold the man was to speak so patronizingly to someone who clearly had more influence in the world than he ever would. "I am Pip," the gnome said again, her Spanish accent more clearly heard this time. The tone of her voice implied she was annoyed at having to repeat herself, despite the patronization clearly going over her head. "Nice to meet you, Pip." The sailor paused before saying the name, probably hoping he'd gotten it right. He turned toward Tarhoon. "And, the scaly one." Tarhoon had never heard so much insulting speech coming from someone who was clearly so clueless about it, but he figured it wasn't worth addressing. Tarhoon also briefly considered ignoring the fool, but decided that those he was working with would need to know his name soon enough. "My name is Kerhelon Tarhoon." The words came out in a low tone, clearly implying that he wasn't pleased at being in this conversation. There was a short pause before Jebediah continued on awkwardly. "Alrighty then. And you there, feller?" He looked at the other figure sitting a short distance from the main group. "I am Elwood, the half-elf, my good sir." Elwood's voice slipped out of his mouth like silver, both friendly and sinister at the same time. He was dressed in dark clothing, with patterns and symbols tucked away into parts of it that Tarhoon had never seen. His eyebrows twitched in such a way that all present felt a sliver of discomfort slither through them. What are you doing? Those eyebrows. I'm getting mighty uncomfortable. Where are you folks heading?" Jebediah turned back to the rest of the group, clearly eager to change the subject. "I'm told we are going to a mine to deal with some stuff," El said, clearly having only a vague idea of why he was hired. "Why are we going to a mine?" Pip seemed confused, obviously lacking even that. "We are headed to Havel's Port," Shirk announced decisively. "Or at least I am. I have no idea what you guys are doing."
"Actually, I am likewise headed to the same port," Elwood informed him.
"Great," Shirk replied. "Can't wait to go with you."
Tarhoon broke through the chatter. "I believe we have all been hired for the same job," he said quietly.
"Really? I had noticed, my scaly friend," Shirk said, his voice openly betraying the fact that he was clearly mocking Tarhoon's attempt to clear up the situation.
Tarhoon kept his tone and face passive as he spoke, allowing no hint of the emotions beginning to rise in him. "Which is why you assumed we weren't going to the same port." He smirked inwardly as Shirk began to backpedal.
"I just assumed this was like a transportation kind of thing. You know, I get off there, you guys stay around, and then I go have fun and you go be boring elsewhere."
"This isn't a lift, honey,"
Pip said, clearly also amused at the bugbear's temporary confusion. "Yeah, I know. It's actually kind of funny that you folks are out here. I didn't know you weren't sailors. You're actually listed as cargo." Jebediah pulled out the manifest for the ship.
"I find that offensive,"
Tarhoon remarked, glaring at Jebediah. He made a habit not to let his emotions into the tone of his voice, but a faint note of his annoyance had begun to leach into it. Pip's indignation was much more nakedly obvious.
"We are listed as cargo?"
she yelled, standing up from the place she had been sitting. Her fists were clenched tightly.
"Does that mean I get free transportation?"
Shirk leaned in a bit, eager to see a silver lining in the situation. "No," Jebediah replied bluntly.
"But does that—"
Shirk stood up straight again, stuttering. He clearly didn't seem to be the smartest of people, Tarhoon noted.
"Paid for by Thessala," Jebediah added after a moment. "Going freight." "Does this mean we are listed simply as goods you are transporting?"
Pip's voice had quieted slightly, but it had lost none of its indignance.
"Yep, perishables,"
Jebediah replied. This did not bode well for the outcome of the trip. Pip's calm clearly didn't last long.
"Perishables? We are perishables?"
she shouted, moving her fist through the air for emphasis.
"Yep, you're the same par as fruit,"
Jebediah said, obviously oblivious to the fact that the gnome was infuriated.
"Huh."
Shirk frowned in the direction of nothing in particular, and sat down on the deck.
"Well, I've said too much already. Goodbye, fellers."
Jebediah turned and made his way back below deck, but the sour atmosphere his words had created lingered in the air.
"Perishables?"
Pip asked after the sailor had disappeared.
"Perishables,"
El confirmed.
"Perishables,"
Pip repeated, confirming it to herself. "I somehow assume that he does not intend for us to survive this venture," Tarhoon said aloud.
"Perishables.
As in, we are valuable and can be lost," Elwood clarified.
"Perishables are fruit that can expire,"
Pip shouted back at him.
"I believe that was his point,"
Shirk tried to point out, but was interrupted.
"We are expendable."
"I think that was his point, yeah."
"I understand that. That is ridiculous."
Pip threw her hands up in anger.
We should not be expendable.
Well, we kind of are, no matter what, Shirk pointed out.
I get the feeling that our employer does not have much faith in us on this mission. Tarhoon was ignored again.
Let's prove to him that we aren't,
Shirk said, attempting to raise morale.
Well, I don't know about any of you, but I am intelligent and smart, and I will get through this mission with or without any of you,
Pip declared, her feelings of superiority hidden to no one. Which is why you needed to repeat intelligent and smart. Tarhoon was certainly heard this time.
Correct,
she said simply, lifting her chin. Shirk made a noise that proved he definitely thought Tarhoon's barb was well warranted. Tarhoon frowned, but didn't reply. Well, this is getting off to a good start, Elwood remarked acidically.
I don't like you, and I don't like you, and I don't like you,
Pip said, pointing to Elwood, Tarhoon, and Shirk in turn.
Why don't you like me?
Shirk said, putting a hand to his chest and taking a step back. Likewise, I'm sure, El shot back. Before anyone could reply, a sailor in the crow's nest shouted, Land ho! Throughout the docking procedure, Tarhoon remained mostly silent. As they stepped out onto the deck, however, he was acutely aware of something that wasn't quite right. His eyes shifted from one side to the other before he realized what was missing. There were no people at the dock, excluding those who had just left their ship. No other ships sat in port, no merchants discussing their wares, no fishermen just off the coast. The hovel's port docks were deathly quiet for a port in the mid-afternoon. Elwood caught the arm of one of the sailors unloading crates onto the dock. Is the town usually this quiet?
Not really. There's supposed to be some merchants at least and stuff coming. But,
The sailor frowned toward the town. I know we don't really have the money to request this of you, but I might consider asking if maybe you guys could consider sticking around. There may be something off. El released the man's arm. Looking further, Tarhoon realized it wasn't just the docks either. The whole town seemed to be abandoned. Looking at the others, El and Pip both were staring at the town with their brows furrowed and a look of concentration on their faces. Shirk, on the other hand, was looking between the others and the town, completely oblivious. The town's completely abandoned. I suspect something is amiss, Tarhoon told the others. I would agree with you, Elwood replied. He motioned to another one of the sailors. Are there sirens or other things around here that would lure people away from the village? That's a question I wouldn't really know, but now I'm nervous, so I'm going to talk to the captain. The sailor left in the direction of the boat.
This isn't Stutter's Creek, correct? So why do we care about this town?
Pip asked. We're here to investigate a series of attacks, right? It may have already gotten here, El pointed out.
I vote we go check out the town,
Shirk said, holding up his hand in the air.
And as the biggest, I get 2 votes.
He raised his other hand. I would say yes, and at the same time no, El said, eyeing the town.
Does that mean I get 3 as the littlest?
Pip asked, raising her eyebrows and putting on a sassy expression. Shirk frowned.
Do not confuse me with logic, please.
Fine. I get 4.
Pip crossed her arms and put her chin in the air.
What? No!
Shirk seemed distressed. Tarhoon had reached his limit. Bahamut would frown on him delaying any help he could provide these people, so he immediately began walking toward the town.
Hey, a man of action! I will follow him,
Shirk said from somewhere behind him, and Pip agreed. Tarhoon heard Shirk run to catch up to him, and several moments later, Pip. El's voice called from behind them. You guys go on ahead. I'll catch right up. I'm going to talk to the captain and see what I can learn.
Go right ahead,
Shirk yelled back at him. As they reached the town, the group noticed that there was one main road that cut the town in two, and each side was lined with shops. Tarhoon made straight for the nearest one, a bakery. He breathed a quiet sigh of relief to see there was no sign of disarray. The bakery was well set up, with a counter, a table, and a stone oven to bake the bread in. The only thing that truly seemed amiss was the lack of anything really bread-related. No flour or bread was anywhere to be seen in the store. It looked completely abandoned. I suggest we spread out and see if we can find anyone throughout the town. Tarhoon told the others in a voice that made it sound like a command more than a suggestion.
I don't want to spread out.
Pip's eyes widened and she stepped backward.
Well, you don't have to,
Shirk shrugged. Unless you think you can't handle yourself, Tarhoon prodded, raising a scaly eyebrow.
Do you see how tiny I am? I will get trampled,
Pip responded indignantly. Shirk stepped between the two and put one hand in front of each of them, a gesture that looked rather odd with how tall he was and how short Pip was.
Hey, come on now, guys, he said, attempting to pacify the two. Please, let's not argue now.
In that case, you two should stay together and look around the town. I'm going to keep looking as well. See if we can find someone here or evidence as to how long it's been abandoned. Tarhoon told them, his voice more overtly commanding.
I am not splitting up.
Pip crossed her arms stubbornly.
No, you won't be splitting up. You'll be coming with either me or him,
Shirk clarified.
I'll follow you, since you're my pack mule,
Pip said and motioned for Shirk to pick her up. Shirk sighed heavily.
Do I really need to pick you up, ma'am?
Yes.
What's gonna happen if I don't? Shirk protested.
I can just sit on your shoulders, it's fine, let's go.
Pip waved off his question and motioned again expectantly.
Fine.
Shirk gave up and lifted Pip up onto his shoulders with one hand.
Please don't pull on my hair as we walk.
Shirk walked out the door and headed down the road. As Tarhoon followed Shirk out, he encountered Elwood, who had apparently just arrived from the docks. We didn't encounter anyone in here, and there's nothing to indicate how long the town's been abandoned. We're going to split up and look for anything to indicate how long everyone's been gone. Elwood looked round for a moment, and then, after spotting what he was looking for, began to head toward the docks. Tarhoon realized it would be wiser to stay with Elwood in case Elwood found any trouble, and went with him. As they made their way back to the docks, Tarhoon saw they were approaching a small booth. A sign, hung from the disheveled and rotting building, read, Port Authoritam. From what Tarhoon could see through the opening in the door, there was a skeleton inside. The skeleton was in a sitting position with its jaw slack and 4 arrows stuck in its rib cage. Tarhoon walked up to the door, and before El could object, kicked it in. The door flew off its hinges, knocking the skeleton to the ground and scattering bones everywhere. Tarhoon entered the booth and picked up a note that had been previously hung around its neck. The note read, Ignore the skeleton. We hated him. The townspeople of Hovell's Port. Tarhoon glared down at the note, annoyed by the time they'd wasted. It had been dated from 4 years ago. Around the booth, Tarhoon saw no books or manifests. He concluded with finality that he was no closer to understanding the mystery than before. He left the booth in a huff, completely forgetting his earlier decision to protect Elwood. He went back into the town, and as he walked down the main road, saw a building that seemed to have a light on inside. At the same time, he also noticed Pip and Shirk approaching from a different building, with Pip still riding on Shirk's shoulder. As the three entered the building, Tarhoon spoke up.
Did you find anything?
We need to find the constable, Pip said confidently.
We're in the constabulary, Tarhoon said flatly, looking at the sign behind her.
I know that. We need to find the constable, Pip stressed.
The tavern here has terrible ale,
Shirk added, nodding his head in the direction they'd come. The constable is right over there. Tarhoon pointed at a man who had a large mustache and sheathed sword standing behind a counter.
There are still people here, but the town is basically dying, Shirk told Tarhoon in a more serious tone.
Constable!
Pip called past Tarhoon to the man he'd pointed at.
I like this man,
Shirk said, noticing the constable's excellent mustache. Tarhoon walked purposefully over to the counter.
Why, hello there, my good man.
The constable addressed Tarhoon in a thick British accent. Then, seeing Pip's fine clothes, he added,
My goodness, a noble in my fine establishment.
Constable?
Pip addressed the man again.
Yes, my lady.
We've been asked to investigate some disappearances and trouble up at the mine, Tarhoon began, but was cut off by Pip.
Did I ask you to speak for me?
Pip asked, the haughtiness clear in her voice. Do I need your permission? Tarhoon responded with a hint of rebellion. He was becoming sick of this woman's superior attitude toward anyone she thought lower than herself.
Yes,
she replied confidently.
Better to strive, of course,
the constable said quietly, observing from behind the counter.
Do you know what is happening at Stutter's mine?
Pip turned back. Talk, Tarhoon added irritably.
Well, yes. Stutter's mine is quite the fine establishment.
Tarhoon was getting the distinct impression that the constable considered just about anywhere a fine establishment.
Where are all the townspeople?
Pip asked, going in a completely different direction.
Oh, yes, the townspeople, at least in Havel's Port, is slowly dying off, you see. We are mainly an agricultural society, and as such rely mostly upon our farms. But, as of late, it seems a terrible plague has hit our corn. Our druids, or as they prefer to be called, shepherds of the shock, have been slowly disappearing.
Did you just call them shepherds of the shuck? Shirk said, amused. As in shucking corn?
Yes, the constable replied flatly. I did not choose that name. They are of a strange bloodline.
Did that Stutter guy name them? The corners of Shirk's mouth tugged upward.
No, that man would probably have called them Stutter's druids or something stupid like that.
Right, because that's stupid. Continue. A slight laughing tone had crept into Shirk's voice, but he did his best to conceal it.
Can you talk any clearer?
Pip asked with a frown.
No,
the constable said, his accent covering the word so thickly even Tarhoon could barely tell what the word had been. Do you have any more information about the disappearance of the miners up at Stutter's mine? Tarhoon said, trying to get the conversation back on track.
That is too complicated of a question,
Pip tried to interject, but Tarhoon responded sharply. Shut up, my lady.
I personally have not been to Stutter's mine. I have not contacted that area of the world for too long. I have been a little too busy helping people on their way out of our fine city.
The constable's brow was furrowed.
Fine city? Tch, you call this a fine city?
Pip's expression made it clear she thought the title was less than apt.
Well, I'm sorry it's not the Imperial Palace, my lady.
The constable shot back, his voice raised slightly. Shirk began to chuckle from behind them. The man's voice lowered again.
But we are simple, humble folk.
Shirk extended his fist, and the constable tentatively returned the gesture, bumping them together softly.
Well, I find this to be a very quaint little society.
Elwood's voice came from behind Tarhoon, letting them know he'd arrived and was listening in. Tarhoon drew in his breath sharply. I apologize if she has insulted your fine town.
Although, I'd think it would have a much bigger population, Elwood added.
Shirk started, turning around violently. Oh, you're here! Hello!
Why, hello there, and welcome to my fine establishment.
The constable was unfazed.
Yes, it's very quaint and very cozy,
Elwood said again, looking around.
I would call it,
the constable began, very established, in my opinion. Shirk winked to the room. The constable looked between Elwood and Shirk.
I would call it the exact opposite of that, actually.
Enough with the jibber-jabbering. We are trying to get to Stutter's mine. We need to know what is happening there, and we need to know why the stuff is happening before we get there.
Pip began shouting in exasperation.
I don't think he knows,
Shirk pointed out.
Please ignore the little one. She has a temper,
Elle apologized. Pip's eyes bulged angrily. He just said he has no information, Tarhoon replied as well.
To be perfectly frank,
the constable began to speak his piece, but it was drowned out by Shirk, Elwood, and Pip all talking over one another, ending with Pip saying, "Good day, sir," and storming out.
Please ignore the young temperous child.
Elle seemed more sarcastic than apologetic this time.
To get to Stutter's mine, I can at least tell you that much. You must follow the road. There is a river that goes all the way along its breadth until you get to Stutter's Creek.
Thank you, my good constable. Actually, the fine gentlemen who are about to unload goods at the port gave me this map. Also, I recommend you go and talk to them before they have completely packed up and left, as they were concerned there is no one here to buy their goods.
Elwood held out his map.
There is no one here to buy their goods, the constable responded.
Realistically, there doesn't seem to be many people left to buy them, Tarhoon agreed.
They are actually packing up on a caravan, and I will be joining them on the morrow in 3 days' time, the man clarified.
Shirk's eyebrows rose suspiciously.
Constable, could you excuse us for a moment? Yes, of course.
Shirk took Elwood and Tarhoon by the shoulders into a corner of the room where they would be less easily heard, and huddled them into a circle.
What if we just take the captain's stuff, pretending to sell it for him, but we just keep it?
Shirk asked softly.
No,
Elwood refused. That's highly disagreeable. He smacked Shirk on the back of the head.
Oh, I thought you were into that kind of thing. I'm sorry.
Shirk was taken aback.
No, I do not believe in harming individuals of a lesser status, Elle responded.
Tarhoon detected a note of superiority in this tone, but didn't comment on it.
Well then, I know someone you could harm,
Shirk mumbled, looking to the door. I refuse to participate in any criminal actions, Tarhoon agreed.
I'm fine with him. The constable is a good man, and I'm proud of him for staying here this long.
Elwood glared. Okay, so instead of stealing, why don't we just transport this stuff for them? See if we can make some extra cash by doing this. They're probably going to be bringing the actual stuff with them. If we can just get them to the other town... Shirk trailed off.
Yes, I know this is an extra job, and we can get extra cash, but... Elle trailed off as well.
I believe this would be an unnecessary diversion. Tarhoon refused to budge. We've been hired for a job, and we should do it.
Could I explain my reasoning for why I agree with our paladin friend?
Shirk and Tarhoon both looked at Elwood.
Our employer is a very impatient man, according to one of the captains, so we should probably get going.
Oh, that is news. Yeah, we should go. Never mind.
Otherwise, we might not be paid at all, and then we'll be stranded here,
Elle added, just to finish off the argument. Yeah, we should move then. Shirk left the huddle and headed for the door.
Good luck on your journey, good sirs,
the constable called after them. Shirk turned back toward him.
Thank you, amazing mustached man,
Shirk called happily as he backed toward the door.
My entire body is mustache.
Everyone in the room cringed slightly. Tarhoon sighed very aggressively and made his way outside.
Good news, Shirk told Pip. We are not stealing anything at all. We're leaving immediately, he said proudly.
Why would we steal anything?
Pip asked, furrowing her brow and lacking context.
No reason. That's the good news,
Shirk answered, smiling broadly. Everyone began to talk over each other again as Elle looked at the map. As they quieted down, Elwood pointed up the road and said,
I believe this road will lead us to our destination. Shall we embark?